Dr. Anna Krasno is a licensed psychologist and the clinical director of the Kegel Autism Center at the University of California, Santa Barbara. She oversees the clinical training and supervision of the staff and designs and implements clinical service initiatives. The Kegel Center annually stages Unmasking Through the Art, which aims to uplift neurodivergent artists and members of the greater Santa Barbara community who think and learn differently. Dr. Kathy Malchiotti is a research psychologist, a licensed professional art therapist, and registered expressive arts therapist. She is the founder, director, and lead faculty member of the Trauma-Informed Practices and Expressive Arts Therapy Institute. She's the author of over 20 books, including Trauma and Expressive Arts Therapy, Brain, Body, and Imagination in the Healing Process, and Understanding Children's Drawings. Kimberly Waters is an assistant professor of studio arts at Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida, America's first accredited baccalaureate institution dedicated to educating neurodivergent students with learning differences. Her works have appeared in exhibitions at galleries such as Urban Glass in Brooklyn, New York, HQ Gallery in Makanda, Illinois, and Copenair Gallery in St. Louis, Missouri. Her pieces grace the permanent collections of the Prague Czech Gallery of Glass in the Prague, Czech Republic, and the Ringling College of Art and Design in Sarasota, Florida. And we're going to begin our conversation with Dr. Krasno. What are some of the benefits of involving children with learning differences in art?
So there are so many benefits to involving children with learning differences in art, and I can name a few here. So what I really think about is how it can help children develop a sense of confidence and pride in what they are producing and creating. I also see, particularly with our work here at the Kegel Autism Center, how important it is for building a sense of community and a sense of connection with others. I see that in our groups for children and adults who are autistic and neurodivergent, and how they come together in putting together creative pursuits and finding people who have similar interests to themselves and making those connections. I also think a lot about how the population I work with, autistic and neurodivergent individuals, are constantly having to mask or hide their differences. And this can be effortful and exhausting. And what we've really seen through the arts and artistic pursuits is how individuals can show who they truly are, like their authentic selves, through art. And this is really important because a lot of people, neurodivergent folks, might have to shift who they are to fit in with society. And this is so exhausting and can lead to a mental health toll. And having the arts as an opportunity to really show their internal experiences and be seen by others and have a way to show others what their experiences are like in a way that is understood by others and witnessed by others is just really, really important. And so I would say there are lots of benefits for children with learning differences being involved in the arts. The last I can think about is also there's so much loading on verbal exchanges and talking in our society, and the arts provide a completely different forum, non-verbally, through the body, through all different ways to express one's emotions and experiences.
Thank you. So, Dr. Malchiotti, are there certain types of art forms that have proven particularly beneficial to individuals with learning differences?
Well, that's a great question. And I think a lot of parents are so interested in that too, and teachers as well. There really aren't really specific interventions for learning disabilities through the arts, but we can qualify that and say there are different parts of the arts that we know are very effective for different reasons. So one example would be anything in the visual arts, even mark making, doodling, very simple image making. It stimulates language. I know a lot of parents and teachers are interested in that, and that's across the board. We've had those studies for almost 25 years supporting that idea that creating something visual will stimulate story. So it stimulates story, also stimulates memories, how much we remember is stimulated almost 2 to 3 times as much than talking alone. So that's pretty significant stuff when you think about just simple drawing or mark making. There's music and sound that support rhythm. Rhythm's a really basic connection between all of us. And, there are a lot of studies too that show that just having children, all types of children, including our neurodivergent population, it helps them learn rhymes, and rhymes lead to supporting reading. So, we have those aspects there. It's not necessarily about playing musical instrument, but just the rhythm itself and in the sound and the music making. And then I'd say the one that's really important is movement, because introducing movement, and it doesn't have to be a formal dance, but movement is an art form. It helps us think better. And we know that from many, many studies, growing literature in this whole idea of thought can be embodied through movement. And by introducing movement to children, they will learn and think more. So I think these things that are part of the arts, that are mechanisms, part of just what the arts are so significant to learning and growing and development.
All right, well, thank you. So, Kimberly, you work with collegians in studio arts at Beacon College. What are some of the misconceptions about the abilities of collegians and even children when it comes to the arts?
So I really find that, like, in my experience working with the students, that a lot of them feel kind of defeated sometimes when they start, thinking that they might not be as good as everybody else. They do a lot of comparisons. However, when we start talking about art, and I work with students to show that there's creative problem solving and there's many different ways to get to the end goal, and it's not so linear. And I think growing up and going through school, they're made to feel like every learning's linear. They either get it right or they don't. And a lot of those things, what we end up finding out usually towards the end of class, of the semester, is that they've improved their self-confidence and understanding, using this creative problem solving to kind of figure out that it's almost like they have superpowers. They have the patience and the ability to outlast other students that might be easier to remember stuff. But, I think in general, it's, thinking that they're either not good enough or lazy, where it's actually quite the opposite. And I notice a lot of students can hyper-focus really, really well, especially when it comes to getting involved into something the making of building something three-dimensional or getting into drawing. And it's just really lovely to see that kind of confidence that happens once they start incorporating art a little bit more into what they're doing.
All right, well, thank you. So, Dr. Krasno, for children with ADHD, can the arts provide a wonderful outlet for expressing their energy and helping them with their focus?
I think that is certainly the case. For children with ADHD in certain settings, maybe academic settings, that have certain behavioral expectations. They may be receiving corrective feedback around their behavior throughout the day. So things like, pay attention or sit still for longer. And getting that kind of feedback on a routine basis can be hard for that child to build a positive self-image and self-esteem and build their confidence. And so I see the arts as a setting that is quite different, where there can be a lot more flexibility and choices and movement and different ways of expressing oneself. And for children with ADHD who might have higher levels of energy or different ways of focusing, like hyper-focusing on certain things, the arts can provide that opportunity for, those movement exercises or dance or theater. So things that are involving the whole body and really getting kids moving around. I would say some ways to involve children with ADHD in the arts could be really exploring with them kind of what it is that they're motivated by, what they're interested in. We know that motivation and interest can really increase engagement and active participation. And so helping nurture what it is that they're interested in, within the particular activity, helping them feel ownership over it, giving choices. This idea that it's not a linear progression, that there's different routes and journeys you can take in the arts, and what might that look like for that child. And I think that would really help to bolster and nurture their strengths, where they're then receiving positive feedback and building that sense of accomplishment.
All right. So, Dr. Malchiotti, not every child is going to be interested in pursuing the traditional art route. So, I'm wondering, how can parents help encourage these children to explore alternate art forms?
Yeah, I think that's a great question because, see, I don't look at the arts necessarily as goal oriented. And I look at the child also as, what's the child's passion? What do they like to do? So how can I infuse that in arts-based experience in a different way? And so I think about the arts as sensory-based expression because we're touching on so many different senses that children need to experience in order to grow and develop. So, I actually try to think about it in 4 areas that, when I'm working with parents, I kind of go through these. Again, I've mentioned movement before, movement-oriented experiences, not about formal dance, about an outcome that we need to be perfect at. But maybe putting a large piece of paper on a wall, giving children 2 big paint sticks, and just moving to music on that paper, making shapes and mark making on there, maybe even painting with one's feet on a large piece of paper. Things that are kind of outside the box of what we think of as art. Then there's the whole realm of sound, listening to music, making sounds together, parent and child, caregiver and child, teacher and child, singing vowels together, percussion on homemade drums. All those are kind of a little bit outside the box of the formal art forms of musical instruments. Then also, I always think about story. How do we get children to do storytelling? Playful enactment, telling stories even just about colors and shapes. So I'm always looking at how do we integrate the senses? How do we cross over in the art forms? And, the last piece I usually call, how do we use the arts for self-soothing and to quiet the body or calm the body? Using things through the senses that make us feel better when we're engaging in different art forms, whether it's creating with paint or creating through movement or any other of the art forms. So I think it's a different way to think about it. And sometimes it's really helpful in getting outside, again, of that definition of what the arts are.
All right, good advice. So, Kimberly, you deal with this every day as a teacher at Beacon College, teaching neurodivergent art students, but every school is not themed or centered around neurodivergent students. So, can you offer some advice for how teachers who are teaching arts in the public schools, for instance, can help to identify and cater the arts to the strengths of neurodivergent students?
So in general, like my experience teaching public school as well as being at Beacon for so long, I think that the way that I teach neurodivergent students is still beneficial for, everybody that's a student. So I find that giving specific instructions that lets the students know the parameters of what's expected of the assignment, what they need to be doing, what checkpoints. But then leaving it, because it's art, right? It's still measurable. They need to know measurable parts within the rubric to understand where they're going and how to get to the final destination. But I like to leave the end result open-ended enough that they can still be creative and come up with their own idea. So it's theirs and it's not like a cookie cutter project. But I think having the specific instructions, having things on the board, having pieces of paper, like handouts that they can, students they either like to take pictures of my board with their phone, even though they have it in, let's say, Canvas, and they want a worksheet of it. I just try to give different modalities of information to them so they process it how they see best that fits their needs.
So, Dr. Krasno, how can art help develop social-emotional well-being in neurodivergent children?
Art is a powerful tool for developing social emotional well-being in neurodivergent children. So using art to be able to express one's authentic and genuine self and one's experiences is a really powerful tool for neurodivergent children to feel that others understand them. And I do a lot of autism diagnostic assessment for preteens and teens, so a first-time diagnosis of autism, and usually they're experiencing mental health symptoms like anxiety and depression from undiagnosed and unsupported autism, but really from feeling like nobody understands them and feeling misunderstood. And it is so often that these preteens and teenagers are involved in the arts. So things like graphic design, video game design, maybe they're in a club where they can dress up and act out as their favorite like movie character or video game character, and or drawing or painting, or really a lot of different pursuits. And so it's really what we see when they're talking about their interests and their passions and how it's coming out in a creative way, is where they feel they can show their true selves and not have to really mask their symptoms. So maybe on the weekends when they are dressing up as a character that they really enjoy, that's when they feel like they're really being themselves. And I think the arts are a protective factor in that way for those mental health concerns. And then, of course, when we arrive at a diagnosis of autism, really having the language to talk about neurodivergence and autism for that child. I also see a lot of benefit in social emotional well-being with regard to like feeling belongingness and community. We have an adult creative club here for autistic adults and neurodivergent adults. And it's really been a safe place for folks to come together and feel like they're in an in-group, that they have a belonging, they have similar interests. And having those feelings of belonging can really increase social emotional well-being. Even having maybe one person you more connect with around a particular thing. So maybe you enjoy the same video game and write screenplays or scripts for the video games, for example. And so we are always thinking about how we can improve belongingness and social emotional well-being through creative pursuits and connecting people.
All right, thank you. Dr. Malchiotti, can art be used as a tool for helping to relieve anxiety and stress in neurodivergent children?
The big answer is yes, because that's been where the most studies have occurred in, I would say, the expressive arts therapies or the various art therapies. Just one example, visual art, doodling and mark making. Within about 15 to 20 minutes, if it's pleasurable for the child, you see a stress level drops measurably in many different ways. 45 minutes is actually better, but with children, 15 to 20 minutes is probably the more appropriate time period. But I think the thing that comes into all this is going to be very personal as well, right? Because we have children, especially neurodivergent children, who may feel the need to be perfect in what they're doing. And we need to check in with them about that to say, all of this is acceptable. Any mark making is acceptable. How does it feel? Does it feel good for you? And then the patience level, right? Being patient enough to engage for that long can be a variable, a different quality in each of us, along any spectrum. And then I think the other piece for me is sometimes I work with children who are very much sensory seeking. They can take in a lot of different senses and get their hands messy and get involved in that way, when there are others that stimulation is a little bit too much for me, and that's not soothing. And we need to be really conscious of those personal qualities. There's nothing wrong with any of those qualities. They're all just personal to the individual, to the child. And we have to be, watchful of that to see that the activity is self-soothing, because it's not one size fits all, but it's understanding that child's own sensory communication and what feels right to them in terms of the experience.
All right, thank you. Now, Kimberly, going back to the classroom, how can art teachers cultivate a growth mindset and nurture a sense of individuality among their students who are neurodivergent?
So in my experience, when I get a chance to start working with, our art majors independently as they move forward, I try to talk to them about, it's not just assignment based that I'm like, I don't want them just to make work based on my assignment for growth. I try to talk to them about, you came here, you want to do art, you're passionate about it. What is it that you want to do now? And sometimes students get like a deer in the headlights look, like, oh, wait, hold on. Like, I've been so used to like you telling me the assignment and I do it and I get a grade for it. That's like, no, now you have to, let's think about what you want to do. And there's no right or wrong answer. So what is it? I try to get their passions going. So whether that's talking to them about, if they want to do something in needlepoint, or then they want to add paint with needlepoint and then throw some clay on it. Like, I try to really push them to try stuff without having the idea of it's going to look bad or I might fail at it, because I try to let them know that, all of those experiments, even if it doesn't work, right? It's all information that's gained that you can kind of put under your hat and use towards something else. And sometimes I call it happy accidents that turn into these amazing art pieces, like not everything that we make in class or down for the rest of our lives is going to be a masterpiece, but it's all part of like the journey of getting to there. And I find that once we start doing that, students really start to kind of get excited about what they want to do. And then I also try to take that for them to take that information and apply it towards their normal assignments that like might be boring. We're doing like techniques and how to understand how to work with pencil, how to work with clay. I'm like, make that assignment your own. You can still have the license to be creative if you make it about something that you're passionate about. And that seems to like set kind of the wheels going, and they usually just take it and run with it, and they just start to grow. But I find focusing on passion is what's key for that.
All right, thank you. So, Dr. Krasno, we understand that representation matters, and I'm wondering how we can ensure that art curriculum exposes neurodivergent students to artists who share similar experiences with them.
Representation is a really important piece of this, and I think we have a long way to go with regard to representation of neurodivergent individuals. What I would say is that here at the Kegel Autism Center, we have thought about this and worked on it a little bit with respect to putting on an annual neurodivergent curated art show. And so it's grown a little bit each year. At first, it was just within the UCSB community. And most recently, our 4th annual show included neurodivergent artists' submissions from outside of Santa Barbara who traveled here to show their pieces. And so it's an art show that's open to all ages to submit art. So we do have some children who submit art. It's mostly adults. And I would say that the community shows up. Each artist can write a bio, put up what being neurodivergent means to them, how it's impacted their life. And what I really see here is then sort of like a multi-generational attendance at this show, where children can come and see neurodivergent adults being very proud, being very accomplished of the works that they're showing. We line the walls with drawings and paintings, graphic design. We have live performances, spoken word or dance, and songs being sung. And so I think it's really important wherever possible, within a school or within a curriculum, to provide spaces that feel safe for neurodivergent individuals to really show what they're producing. And for example, we had one female adult who had completed a self-portrait decades ago and had never shown it. And at our first art show, she put it up, and it's actually still up 4 years later with her bio. And everyone coming through our center, we have a lot of autistic and neurodivergent children come through, can really see on our walls that representation of neurodivergent individuals, expressing themselves and who they truly are through their art.
All right, thank you for that. So, Dr. Malchiotti, I want to shift into your wheelhouse. Can you tell us a little bit about how arts therapy comes into play in all this with neurodivergent children?
First I was thinking, as we're having this conversation, about our educational system not recognizing the arts as part of the core curriculum in so many cases. So I've been really fortunate to be part of a U.S. Department of Education grant, really looking into how can we impart and embed the expressive arts into the curriculum, to help teachers bring it to the students, to help students experience it, hopefully to have parents get involved and learn about some of these approaches. So I've been really lucky for the last 3 years to be working with that. I see the arts therapies not as a form of psychology per se, but as a way for the classrooms and for all children, including the neurodivergent children, to have islands of art throughout the day. So, they may have a movement experience. They may have an art making, visual art experience. They may do some dramatic enactment and playing together. They may be making sounds together and engaging in percussion. All these things are kind of on that model of expressive arts therapy because we're trying to touch all the senses. But I think the important thing here with the arts therapies and art education in general, you're giving all children expressive moments during the day outside of the usual visual, verbal language oriented way of communicating. And I think it's a really great equalizer. Also addresses those socio-emotional learning parts of curriculum. But again, I think these islands of the arts throughout the day, rather than kind of putting art as a special thing over here or in another part or after school, is just such an important piece. And the arts therapies are really contributing a lot to that knowledge base.
All right, well, thank you. And I love the phrase, islands of art, and I'm going to borrow that as I ask Kimberly, thank you, as Kimberly, our last question. So beyond the classroom, how can parents and caregivers create islands of art in their homes so that this sense of art continues throughout the day?
So I think it's really important. I mean, growing up being a creative person myself, I had the support of my parents. And there's little things that you can do that even if you're not, as a parent, you're not have the creative gene, so to speak, allowing your kids to do fun things, allowing things to be messy sometimes, like going outside. And if you have paint or chalk, it's okay to get your clothes messy. It's okay to because messes can be cleaned up. And just allowing them that space to be creative and not getting in trouble. Maybe if you shouldn't draw on the walls, you could give them a space an easel or an area that they could do a little mural. It can always be painted over, right? So I think incorporating, you don't have to spend a lot of money to do it. You could take classes and encourage them to do local painting classes or ceramics or clay or drawing. But a lot of that stuff can just be done with things just laying around your house, just fun. You could make binoculars with my daughter. We made binoculars from toilet paper rolls and wrapped tape around it and went around the neighborhood looking at stuff. Little moments like that, I think really help that creative kind of building that confidence and the ability to be playful, because that's really important as you continue to move on in life.
And I think that's going to have to be our last word today. Dr. Anna Krasno, Dr. Kathy Malchiotti, and Kimberly Waters. Thank you for the knowledge.